Hello everyone. Hello, I'm Gilles. I'm the director of the Marché du Film, and I am very, very happy to welcome again this focus presentation this year at the Marché du Film because it's a session that we do with two very strong partners of the Marché. Of course, I'm speaking about the Audiovisual Observatory. The Audiovisual Observatory, sorry, that is a long-time partner of the Marché du Film and who is doing this report with us that we call Focus. You have the 2023 edition here today that you can find here at the Marché, or you can also download it on our online platform, marchédufilm.online. So I want to thank you, Suzanne, for this partnership. It is a very long partnership. And I want to thank the team of the Observatory for their amazing work. Especially in a moment when there is a lot of questions, it's very important that we can find some concrete data, concrete numbers to understand how the business is going. And the second partner that is here today is, of course, our country of honor, Spain, with Beatriz and ICAA. So I'm very happy for your trust for this edition and to have Spain as a country of honor. Suzanne?
Thank you, Guillaume. I can only return the pleasure, A, of being here, and B, of this partnership, which has really worked out so well over the years. And now you will witness another edition of the Focus. I hope you have all gotten your copies over there. And Focus wouldn't be existing if it wasn't for the European Film Agency Research Network. Here I go. So EFAN, because it's thanks to the collaboration that we have with them that we get all these important figures. And what we want to do is to share really the gist of it, so some of the observations that we have done, and in a sort of go back and forth some presentation and some questions then to our special guest, the country of honor, as already mentioned. And we are really happy that Beatriz Navas is with us. She is since 2018 the General Director of the Institute of Cinematography and Audiovisual Arts in Spain. But actually, I think she has devoted all her career to cultural management and to audiovisual research. So really pleased to have you here. And then you see three people next to her. These are my dear colleagues from the observatory. I start with the person next to me, which is Gilles Fontaine. He heads the Department for Market Information. Next to him is the Deputy Head of Department, Kanzler. And then the lady who's left is Patrizia Simone, who is a senior analyst on film markets in the observatory. And it's actually those people who have not only worked on the Focus, but who are also now guiding you through this little exercise, which I hope you enjoy. And again, don't forget to get your Focus.
Thank you, Guillaume. Thank you, Suzanne. Now, good afternoon to everyone. A brief introduction. We are now going to provide you with an overview of the latest development and trends in the film industry in Europe. In order to do so, we will use a selection of key indicators that you can find in our publication, The Focus, namely admissions, screens, number of release, production levels, analysis of the box office, and some policy aspects. You will find that the focus is about international markets, but we will now focus on the European Union and the UK only, with special attention to Spain, that is this year country of honor. So let's start without further ado, and let's look at the first indicator. The first indicator is about cinema attendance. As you can see from the graph, in the European Union and the UK, the number of ticket sales increased to 657 million in 2022. This represents a remarkable increase over the previous year, where we had about 400 million admissions. But if we look back at before the pandemic, this level still fall short of the average levels registered between 2017 and 2019. So if we look at this comparison, what we would call the recovery rate is only 67%. Admissions in 22 only account for this percentage share of average pre-pandemic admissions. Now, this is a pan-European picture, and it's true that admissions increased in all EU countries. However, there are significant differences across territories. We can see that in some territories, the recovery rate was above average. The recovery was led by Denmark, who showed the highest recovery rate with 82%. France also had an above average recovery with 73% of admissions compared to pre-pandemic levels. And while among the big 5 countries in the EU and the UK, admissions were just above average in Germany and the UK. We also had territories with a below average admissions level, and Spain is among this group, together with Italy, which is in the tailhead of the recovery rate, with less than half admissions registered before the pandemic. If we look at the 2023 preliminary data for the first quarter, we have good news. The admissions underwent further improvement as the recovery rate compared to the pre-pandemic average kept on increasing. As you can see from these figures, we are not there yet, so it is unlikely that in 2023 we will reach a full recovery in Europe. Now, we saw that in Spain, admissions in 2022 only represented a little bit less than 60% of pre-pandemic levels. This is just above Italy, who was really showed the lowest rate of recovery. As for Italy, audience surveyed showed that one of the main reasons reported to explain the fact that admission would not jump back to previous levels sooner or as fast as other countries was reportedly fear related to the contagion, to the spread of the COVID, which also led to audiences in a way losing the habit. Was this also the case for Spain? What were the main reasons in play in this context?
Well, I have here the figures. In 2022, closed with 61.2 million admissions, compared to 2019, when we have 104 admissions. It's a big difference. But we think that the ascent is slow but stable and constant. You can see it's not here the graphic, but you see a constant line. No? But we think that the release rate of the big blockbusters is still far from the pre-pandemic release level. And after all, these type of films are the ones that move the largest number of audiences to theaters. Also, the change of viewing habits due to the eruption of the platforms. Audience over 60 is not coming back as they used to. And in a way, maybe the economic crisis linked to the the war in Ukraine is also involved, we think, in this, is affecting also.
And so what would be your expectation as regard the next developments of the box office?
The first 4 months period of 2023 leaves a balance of 21.4 million admissions. That means 25.2% more than the first 4 months of the period of last year. Positive growth is maintained, but one must be caution, since the difference with respect to the means of pre-pandemic figures is still minus 35.7. So we are aware that we will not fully recover until the end of 2024.
Okay, so a little bit to wait. And to this regard, what would be some factors or strategies as regard programming, for instance, that could help revive cinema going and boost growth?
Big blockbusters are capable of attracting young audiences and families. However, it is the audience over 60, I think, who is not coming back as they used to. And these audiences were very cinephile and essential for the industry, especially for national cinema and independent cinema. And I think we need to focus more on programming this kind of films. For example, we are happy because in autumn, in the top 20 ranking, between 8 and 11 films were Spanish films. It was never before something like that. So there is an interest in local films, in European films, maybe because we are able of having different genre films. For example, in this between 8 and 11 films, there were family films, animation films, terror films, dramas. And it was very important for our cinema, the success in the film festivals. For example, we had a film like Asbestas, A Lot of Weeks. You know, it was premiere in Cannes last year, and it won a lot of awards. And also Lullaby, it's a film. It was in Berlin. So the festivals helps us. We think that we have, and from the institute, we are helping the theaters to show more European and Spanish films. We need cinephiles and people over 60 to come back to cinemas, and programming films to them, it will help.
Okay, so targeting also specific audiences. Thank you, Beatriz. We are now go and look at another key indicator, which is the number of operational screens in Europe. As you can see, contrary to admissions, the screen base did not really undergo a reduction. In fact, overall, cumulatively, there were even more screens in 2022 compared to the pre-pandemic average. And if we compare 2022 with 2019 only, we see that it's just some 300 screens less than the peak years of 2019. Of course, there are again some variations across countries. France, Germany, the UK saw their screen infrastructure increase compared to the pre-pandemic average in 2022. In Spain, the situation remained completely stable, and even Italy only saw the screen base decreasing by a very negligible percent. This is about the overall count of screens. Then, what do these figures mean? The evolution of admissions, of ticket sales, was in a way disconnected from the evolution of the number of screens in Spain as much as in Europe. So you can see an indexed development of admissions versus screens, and they follow two separate trajectories. And this is possibly due to huge support in terms of public help given to tackle the crisis. To this regard, I would like to know how does the situation look like in Spain, and does this situation, how does it look for the future? What's the outlook as regard the screen infrastructure?
The numbers of screens and cinema remains stable. I give you some figures. We have 732 cinemas, 26 more than the previous year, and 3,626 screens, 1.2% more than previous year. Available seats have also increased by 0.9, reaching figure like we have 760,700 seats. That's where the and it's curious because we have kind of phenomenon, like is, for example, the Embajadores cinema. It's a cinema that was opened during the pandemic period in the center of Madrid, and now they are opening another cinema also in Madrid and in Asturias in the center. And I think their success has to do with programming. No? They curated very well that. They are focused on many targets. In fact, the cinemas are also investing a lot in have premium offer and that. So we have very enthusiastic and optimistic companies, and you can see. And since 2020, we are supporting the theaters. There were no grants for theaters from the state, from some regions, for example, Catalonia or País Vasco, but not from the state. So since 2020, each year we have grant around 10 million for the theaters, and also we have bonus for young people that become 18. They can spend 400 euros in cultural events, and 200 is for performing arts, music, and cinema. And they are spending the most part of that in cinema. And from July to October, at least October, the president has just announced that there will be a bonus for the theaters to sell tickets for 2 euros for people over 65. So we are working. We want to keep the infrastructures of cinema stable. Yes.
Thanks. That looks like a varied strategy. You mentioned the effort of exhibitors in programming. Now, in several territories, we've observed an increasingly widening gap between small art house cinemas, a focus on cinéma d'auteur, and big groups, chains that are trying to enhance the cinema experience for the customers through large formats for screens or through luxury seatings. Did you also see that in Spain?
Yes. There are more premium experiences, and it's important because, as we all know, we have at home bigger screens than ever, professional sound system, and I think that the experience must have to be as powerful or more powerful than at home, and it's important, and yes, we are, yes.
So in a way, there is also this idea of movie theater as temple of entertainment.
Yes, and a special experience. It must be a special entertainment, spectacular, I mean, and also a community experience. And we need to focus on that and put in value that, yes.
And to conclude this section, I also heard a lot about discussions over film quotas in Spain. Actually, it seems that there are some groups that would like to put an end to the system altogether, and some other would, on the other hand, increase the quotas for European and national cinema. Could you tell us more about this development?
In the actual film law, there is a quota of 25% of European films. And now there is a new project of film law that it's in the Congress and must be approved at the end of the year. And this new project is 20, not 25, because as Great Britain, the UK, doesn't count as an European films. In a way, the theaters asked us to help them they want an easier quota. Of course, they don't want a quota. But in the new law, there's still a quota. So for us, it's important, the quota, and we will help the theaters to be easy for them to program related to this quota. Yes, but for us, for Spain, we want to maintain the quota.
Okay, thanks a lot. And with that, I hand it over to Martin.
So British films will not count as European films for this quota?
Well, it's not European films, but European Union films.
Okay. Beatriz, you mentioned that there was a limited number of blockbusters that were released in 2022 as one of the reasons why the recovery was probably a bit slower than many of us hoped. I'd like to take that as a cue to share some more figures with you on the number of film releases, which is another indicator that we try to cover in the focus. The number of film releases is a kind of a tricky indicator when you try to calculate it on a cross-border, pan-European level. But thanks to our Lumiere database, where we try to track every film that is released in Europe with the admissions, we have a tool that allows us to roughly estimate that number. And for 22, we could identify at least, it's a provisional figure, over 2,200 films that were released for the first time in 22 in the EU and the UK. And that compares to 2,350 in 2017. So the number of overall film releases was almost back to its pre-pandemic level in 22. And I'd say that's a minimum, because all the countries where we could identify that number actually had recovery rates. In this context, you don't really need to speak of recovery that much, that were above the European average, with Spain actually taking the lead, that there were more films released in 22 overall than there were on average before the pandemic. So when you compare the index development of film releases and the box office again, you can see that two things. For one, the number of film releases never dropped proportionally as much as box office dropped. And two, the kind of gap that opened up in 2020 is still there. So since 21, 22, both box office and film releases have been growing more or less in the same manner. Box office did not grow over proportionally when compared to the number of film releases. Having said that, there is one, however, the data show one diverging trend, and that is the number of European film releases is back. It's the same level as before. However, there is the US films, the number of US film releases is definitely down. And it's more or less at the same level as it was in 2020 and 21. Only 73%, so 3/4 of what used to be, I think it was, no, I don't quote the figures because I don't know it by heart now, but about 3/4 of the pre-pandemic level. And that is not only true in Europe, but it's even more true in individual countries where we could measure that. Germany, Italy, and Spain, it is even more extreme, where local films were at 143% compared to their pre-pandemic level, and US films only 72%. So European film releases are already back, and in many countries are actually exceeding the pre-pandemic level. US films are significantly down, or were down in 22. Of course, the lower number of US releases did not keep them from completely dominating the European box office charts. Like, all the top 20 titles are US studio titles. The top 3 were Top Gun, Avatar, and Minions. and all 3 of them sold more than 30 million tickets. And that is actually quite a strong figure. When you compare it with 2009, 2017, and 2018, it was only in 2019 there you had 4 films that sold more than 30 million. In 2017 it was 2, and in 2018 it was only 1. So the top end was back, also with the potential in 22. However, what is interesting, you can see here, starting with number 4, which is very close but not crossing, there's not a single film that sold between 20 and 30 million. And there were, before the pandemic, there were always 4 to 5 films that fell into that range. Then the next range, if you look at it, is 10 to 20 million. Also here, it was 10 films, I think, in 22 that fell into this category, compared to 12, 13, 14 before the pandemic, which is not such a big difference, but where there's a really big difference is the number of films that sold between 5 and 10 million. That was only 10 films in 22 compared to 25 before the pandemic. So this is probably, you could interpret that as the famous US mid-tier films that you read a lot about that are missing. And that is clearly represented in the figures. The top 20 are quite similar in all European countries, with the big US titles featuring in there. Of course, mixed in are local, in this case I would say blockbusters or really local successes. In the case of Spain, it was 3 films in 22, and led by these 3 films, Spanish films captured a market share of 22%, I think it was, in 22, which is a very good result. It's, I think, the second highest result that Spanish films had since 2014. And Spain was not the only country where local films performed really well. Overall, in 22, European films did quite well. They took a market share of over 28%, which is at the upper end of their typical ranges between 26, 27, up to 28. And we estimate that cumulative admissions to European films were almost 190 million in 22, compared to 270 in 2017, meaning that the recovery rate specifically for European films, and that is excluding what we call incoming investment films, like Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, that not included in this definition, was 69% compared to the pre-pandemic averages. When you compare that with the admissions to US films, you can see that admissions to US films really collapsed in 2020, as basically no blockbusters were released. And compared to that, the admissions to European films never dropped to the same extent. But then in the past 2 years, of course, as blockbusters came back, admissions to US films were growing way more rapidly than the admissions to European films. However, bottom line, as of 22, the recovery rate for European films was slightly higher than for US films, which cumulatively took a estimated market share of 65%. The picture for Spain is similar as far as the European films are concerned, where European films took almost 27%, 22 out of which coming from local productions. But what is different from the pan-European average is the recovery rate for US films, which in Spain had much more challenging time, it seems, to come back to their pre-pandemic levels than in other European markets. Now, we've seen the level of European releases is back to normal pre-pandemic levels, whereas the number of US releases is almost 25% down. At the same time, we've seen that admissions to European films and US films are both climbing back, and they are, even though slightly different, more or less at the same level. So it should not come as a surprise that the average admissions for European films are significantly lower in 22 than they used to be before. I'm not commenting on the specific figure because that's kind of meaningless, but what you can, because it always depends on which range you look at. For this calculation, we've only looked at films that sold at least 10,000 tickets, not in order to not, how do you say, dilute the admissions by the thousands of films that sell less. But what you can see here is that this downward trend, even though it's significantly lower in 22, it was already lower in 2019 and already lower in 2018 when compared to 2017. In contrast, average admissions to US films, yes, they fell. I mean, no, they basically stayed more or less the same in 2018, 2019, and 22. So it seems that if you can simplify, the US films followed a different strategy than European films during the past three years in terms of the releasing films. Also, concentration is up. We've looked at two indicators that you can use to measure concentration. The first one is the number of films that it takes in Europe to generate 80% of total ticket sales. And that number is slightly down in 22. In 22, it was 136 films that cumulatively generated 80% of total admissions. And that's above 10 films less than it was before the pandemic. Another indicator, and very interesting, I think, is the development of the share of the top 10 films in total admissions, because this one increased really significantly. From 23% in 2017, was already higher in 2018, it was 29% in 2019, and it's 32% in 22. In contrast, when you compare the share of the top 50 films, that increased only from 57 to 61%. So that means the concentration is really happening at the top 10, the very few blockbuster level. It does not go wide. When you look at the top 100, actually the share is the same. So it's really among those top films. Now, we have 3 years of box office crisis. We have lower average admissions. We have a higher concentration. You'd think that this might impact production levels. But so far, this is not the case at all. We are estimating that in Europe 28, in 22, there were 1,960 theatrical feature films, fiction and documentaries produced. That's the second highest level after 2019, and so slightly above the pre-pandemic average. The situation, of course, differs in individual countries. Spain and Italy are two countries where the production level is actually significantly above pre-pandemic levels, and that despite the fact that there are two countries where the recovery rate is below the European average. And the two smaller countries that stood out in the statistics is Slovenia and Slovakia, just for comparison, where it's at 150% compared to pre-pandemic times. Now, I'd like to do the same exercise with the index development, comparing the development of the production of European films with the development of overall admissions in Europe 28. And like screens, it seems that the production levels were basically unaffected by the last 3 years of significantly lower box office. The dip in 2020, I would interpret as primarily coming from, I don't know, was it 3 months or something, halt of complete production stop due to the lockdowns, rather than a reaction to the lower box office, which makes sense because also it doesn't translate that quickly. But basically in 22, you were back to pre-pandemic levels already, and you're exceeding it in 22. And that is particularly strongly the case in Spain, where production growth in 22 was really, really strong. So my question to you, Beatriz, now is how do you explain this increasing gap between production and underlying box office?
It has to do with a big state plan we have. We have a plan from the government from 2020 and one of the main objectives is to increase the production in 30%. International shootings, but national shootings also. It has to do also with the maturity of the financing system, the grants from the regional administration and the state administration. Our budget to support production has grown a lot in the last years, and if the financing scheme for the production company is better, we can produce more, and also we are co-producing more. We used to have like 20% of the productions were co-productions, and now we are nearly 30%. So. And we have a new generations of producers coming from the film schools that have lots of power and will to make films. So now we are in a very dynamic moment for Spanish cinema. So it has to do with more budget from the state, more more professionals, and working in the international field. And it's a maturity of our supporting system. It has to do with that. Yes.
We know from other countries that on average about 40% of the typical financing plan of a European film comes from public support, be it direct public support or production incentives. Then broadcasters about 20%, and then the rest is pre-sales. We don't have data for Spain. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us how the typical financing mix of a Spanish theatrical film looks like?
A typical, well, there is 50% of the budget of the film is from public grants, from the state and from the regional funds, and then the public television and also regional televisions and sales to the platforms. So the percentage, it depends on the project, because we have very small projects, big projects. There is an heterogeneous kind of projects in Spain.
Okay.
But the eruption of the platforms, and they are supporting a lot of our industry, yes.
But public support evidently also plays a really important role.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Translates into the picture that we are seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Over the past years, you've been increasingly hearing voices calling for fewer films to be supported, but bigger productions. Does the ICAA have a strategy with regard to supporting Spanish blockbusters to be blunt, at the expense of other smaller productions?
Well, our strategy is to support big films with a big budget, but also small kind of films. But we are not deciding to support one or because I think for Spain it's important to support all kind of films. Yes. No. Mm-hmm. But of course, yes, in the last years, if you have a big project, we will help you. I mean, with the points in the grant system, if you have a big budget, we will help you to obtain more money. Yes.
Thank you. I would like to close this session by a series of more maybe policy or general questions, not backed by figures. My first question is about public support, generally speaking. We have the feeling that there is maybe not an escalation, but a strong increase in many places in Europe of funds dedicated to production incentives. And it's unclear whether the classical selective direct funding is also increasing. So we are asking ourselves, between the two objectives, let's say diversity on the one hand and competitiveness on the other hand, is there some kind of shift? And of course, we are aware of the project you mentioned before, the audiovisual hub and so on. So, yes, what about this balance between competitiveness and diversity, production incentive and direct support? Is it changing?
That's the challenge, because, for example, we are supporting a lot women filmmakers. For us, it's very important, and a new generation of filmmakers. So, yes, we have to keep that in balance, and I think that's important. Selective diversities. We are the Ministry of Culture. We are part of that. So we are supporting special cultural films, and then we have the tax incentives that go directly to maybe more big films. So we don't like to choose between the two options. We think it's important to support both.
But you're still saying that there is a need for a balance, and you do not contradict the idea that there are more dynamics in terms of amounts of money allocated to production incentive than to direct support, no?
Well, each company has to find their specific way of financing the film. So for the moment, the way we are working, supporting big films and animation films and selecting films, is working in Spain, and we are seeing that in the response of the audiences.
You mentioned as a justification for selective support gender equality policies. We are monitoring gender equality at the observatory since years. The overall picture, let's say, in Europe is that it's making very slow progresses. What's your take, let's say, about directors, screenwriters? We see that the situation is even worse regarding, for instance, composers or director of cinematographers. What's your view on the development? Are the policy efficient enough? What's happening?
Well, in Spain, I think it's efficient. We started in 2020 with quotas. We have 35% of the budget must go to films directed by women, but also the intensity of public aids, it went from 50 to 75%. And that was really important, the combination of the quota, but the more intensity for films directed by women, and also we'll give points if the film is directed by a woman, if the scriptwriter is a woman, the executive producer is a woman, and also if 50% of the head of the technical crew is a woman. So we, in the last years, we find that now we have more composers, female composers, and we see this each year in the Premios Goya, that there are nominees women, that there were no women in the composer, for example, in films, cinematographers also. So it is really working. Maybe the figures are from until 2020, but now we are making studies each year, and we find that the impact is direct is incredible. And for example, here, the films that are in competition are women, female directors beside it in the Kanzler, also the short films that are in competitions. So if the measures are working in our case.
Maybe now a question about your policy towards green film and sustainability. We've seen that film agencies have chosen different kind of tools, specific funds, more points. What is your approach to encourage green production?
As there are many different systems and proposals to green shooting, now we used to give points if you have a green plan, let's say, and now it's obligatory to have a green plan. We don't ask for a specific one because we are not sure what is the best one, but it's you must have a green plan, and if you want to have a grant.
But do you see this as a first step to educate filmmakers before maybe going to more tight obligations in terms of measuring emissions and so on? Yes, is it a first step, this encouragement?
Yes, we think so. We are involved, and the way we are involved is with these plans. And of course they are having training courses in the production companies, as we know, and that.
And my last question will be about, let's say, talents. I think we are all aware of the boom of the audiovisual sector in Spain, and in particular of the TV series sector. I would be interested in understanding if this has created some kind of tension, shortage of talents, as it is sometimes said. Are TV series stealing talents from film, if it's particularly a challenge for film? And if yes, is there any way to compensate for these tensions?
Well, there has always been tension when the status quo is removed, but in our case, series are helping cinema because many actors from the series are part of the films. So there's a tension, but the eruption of series are helping our films, and the audiences are connected to our films because of the series. So let's say that it's healthy tension, I think.
Okay, and are there specific training programs within the Audiovisual Hub project also?
For technicians, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. We are with fans from the Next Generation European Plan. We have now 3 specific projects for training. We are investing more than 100 million to have programs for the next 3 years. We are working with school cinemas from Barcelona and from Madrid, and also for the Training Institute of the Public Television, and she's working with also the private sector, and it's necessary, yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. I have a small clock here saying that we have 42 seconds left. So I will use them to thank you, Beatriz, a lot for joining, for, I guess, delivering kind of an optimistic message on all fronts. So thanks a lot. I don't know if there are still copies of the focus on the table. If it's the case and you didn't grab one, do not hesitate. Thanks a lot, and some advertising. We have another conference tomorrow morning at 9:30 about the future of cinema. Have a nice evening. Thanks a lot.